On fire. Not metaphorically. The building around him was collapsing, smoke filling the air, and the man at the center of it, a Roman emperor, the most powerful man alive, sat down and continued writing. Not orders. Not commands. Not desperate letters. Philosophy. Marcus Aurelius, in the middle of a military campaign, plague raging through his armies, his empire crumbling at the edges, enemies pressing from every front, sat down and wrote to himself. Reminded himself that the obstacle was not the enemy. The obstacle was his reaction to the enemy. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That line was not written for history. He never intended anyone to read it. It was a personal reminder, a man forging himself in the fire of adversity so that nothing, absolutely nothing, could shake him. And here is what they never tell you about Marcus Aurelius. He was not born unshakable. He built it. Brick by brick. Day by day. Thought by painful thought. That is what this video is about. Not motivation. Not hype. Not a 30-day challenge. This is about the ancient technology of becoming so mentally, emotionally, and spiritually strong that life's chaos becomes background noise. That other people's opinions become irrelevant. That failure becomes fuel. That loss becomes a teacher. This is Stoic philosophy, the philosophy of warriors, emperors, and free men. Stay with me. Because by the end of this, you are going to understand why some men bend and break under pressure, and why others become more solid, more powerful, more themselves every single time life hits them. If this is your first time here, welcome to Inner Steel. Subscribe right now. This channel exists for men who are serious about building a mind that cannot be defeated. Let's begin. Point 1. The man who controls his inner world rules everything. In 56 AD, a slave named Epictetus was being tortured by his master, Epaphroditus, a cruel and petty man who liked to demonstrate his power over others. Epaphroditus grabbed Epictetus's leg and began twisting it. Epictetus said calmly, "You are going to break it." Epaphroditus kept twisting. "There," said Epictetus, when the bone snapped. "Did I not tell you so?" Now you can call that many things. You might call it madness. You might call it stubbornness. The Stoics called it sovereignty. Epictetus could not control his master's cruelty. He could not control the pain in his body. What he controlled, the only thing any man ever truly controls, was his interpretation of what was happening to him. He refused to give Epaphroditus what he really wanted, not just broken bones, but a broken spirit. And here is the principle underneath that story. The man who governs his inner world cannot be governed by the outer world. This is the foundational teaching of Stoic philosophy, and it is the most countercultural idea you will encounter in the modern age. We live in a world that constantly tells you your emotional state is someone else's responsibility. That if you feel bad, someone needs to fix it. That if you are angry, someone made you that way. That your mental weather is dictated by your external circumstances. The Stoics called this the greatest slavery of all. Not chains on your wrists. Chains on your mind. Because if your peace depends on how other people treat you, you are a prisoner of 7 billion jailers. If your confidence depends on whether your business succeeds, you are at the mercy of markets you cannot control. If your happiness depends on being loved, being respected, being approved of, you are permanently vulnerable. Epictetus, a man who was literally owned by another man, was freer in his mind than kings. The practice, every morning, before you walk out into the world, pause. Take 1 minute to identify the things you control and the things you do not. Remind yourself that your response to what happens is yours, and yours alone. That is not a small thing. That is everything. Subscribe to Inner Steel for more of this. We go deep here. Point 2. Voluntary hardship, why easy destroys you. In 1914, Sir Ernest Shackleton's ship, the Endurance, became trapped in Antarctic sea ice. For 10 months, the ice slowly crushed the hull. The crew watched their ship die. When it finally sank, 28 men were stranded on one of the most hostile environments on Earth, no rescue coming, no communication with the outside world, temperatures that could kill a man in minutes. They survived 22 months. Not because they were the strongest men in the world. Not because they had the best gear. They survived because Shackleton had spent years voluntarily choosing difficulty before difficulty chose him. He had trained in the cold, slept on hard ground, marched into discomfort long before the Endurance set sail. And so when the real catastrophe arrived, he was not shocked into paralysis. He met it as a familiar visitor. The Stoics understood this instinctively, 2,000 years before Shackleton. Seneca, one of the wealthiest men in Rome, routinely stripped himself of luxury. He slept on hard floors. He wore rough clothes. He went days eating only bread and water. Not because he was poor. Because he was training. He wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself all the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?'" The logic is devastating in its simplicity. The man who has never been cold cannot endure cold. The man who has never been hungry collapses at the first sign of lack. The man who has never failed cannot recover from failure. The man who has never been alone cannot find stillness. But the man who has chosen difficulty, who has gone out and wrestled with hardship on purpose, that man is inoculated. The modern world has engineered maximum comfort. Same-day delivery. Temperature-controlled rooms. Entertainment on demand. Pain pills at the pharmacy. Every edge smoothed. Every inconvenience eliminated. And men are breaking. Not despite the comfort. Because of it. Comfort is a cage with a padded floor. You stop noticing the bars. The practice deliberately introduced difficulty into your week. Cold showers. Fasting. Hard exercise. Long walks in bad weather. Sit with boredom without reaching for your phone. These are not punishments. They are reps. You are building a man who cannot be ambushed by life. Point 3. The view from above. Stop letting small things devour you. In 1968, the Apollo 8 astronauts became the first humans to orbit the moon. William Manders lifted his camera and took what would become one of the most famous photographs in history, Earthrise. The Earth, rising over the barren gray surface of the moon. Small. Blue. Floating in an ocean of absolute nothing. Anders said afterward that he had gone to the moon and discovered the Earth. Every petty grievance he had carried, the egos, the bureaucracy, the daily frustrations, vanished when he saw the planet from that distance. They were real. But they were small. Marcus Aurelius called this exercise the view from above. He would stop, in the middle of court politics, betrayals, administrative disasters, and deliberately zoom out. He would picture himself from above. His palace from the air. His empire from the clouds. Rome from the stars. The human drama continuing as it always had, billions of people moving through their tiny joys and catastrophes. And then he would ask, in the context of all of this, what is this problem actually worth? Most of the things that destroy men's days, destroy their relationships, their peace, their health, are not large. They feel large because we live inside them. Someone didn't reply to your message. Someone spoke badly of you. You missed a goal. You were embarrassed. You made an error. You lost something you had. From inside the moment, these things are enormous. They fill the entire sky. From the view from above, they are barely visible. This is not nihilism. The Stoics were not saying nothing matters. They were saying, reserve your energy for what actually matters. Do not spend the currency of your attention on insults, slights, minor failures, and the opinions of people who will be forgotten. You have limited energy, limited focus, limited days. Every hour you spend boiling about something small is an hour stolen from something real. The practice: when something disturbs you, pause before you react. Ask, will this matter in 5 years? Will anyone remember this in 10? If the answer is no, choose your response carefully. Spend your energy like a man who knows he has a finite amount of it. Point 4. The obstacle is the way, your resistance is your training ground. In 1955, a young black woman named Rosa Parks was told to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. The law said she had to. She refused. She was arrested. The city turned against her. Her life became dangerous. She lost her job. She received death threats. And that resistance, that wall thrown up against her, became the very thing that launched one of the most powerful civil rights movements in American history. The Montgomery bus boycott. The Civil Rights Act. The reshaping of a nation. The obstacle became the way. Marcus Aurelius wrote this principle so clearly that Ryan Holiday built an entire best-selling book around it. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is not optimism. It is strategy. The Stoics believed that adversity was not separate from your development. It was the mechanism of your development. That every obstacle contained, hidden inside it, exactly what you needed to grow. The man who loses his job learns resourcefulness. The man whose relationship ends learns self-knowledge. The man whose plan fails learns humility and adaptability. The man who is humiliated learns what he is actually made of. But only if he faces it rather than fleeing. Most people, when life throws the obstacle, run. They numb out. They blame. They catastrophize. They wait for someone to remove the wall. The Stoic turns and faces the wall. Studies it. Asks, what is this teaching me? What does this require of me? What must I develop in order to move through this? And then he moves. There is a Japanese concept called misogi, the practice of doing something so difficult that you are not sure you can survive it. Not to destroy yourself, but to discover that you are more than you believed. The man who chooses the obstacle builds a different relationship with difficulty. He stops seeing it as a punishment and starts seeing it as a forge. The practice: identify the obstacle in your life right now, the thing you have been avoiding, resenting, or trying to escape. Ask yourself, what is this actually asking me to develop? What would I become if I moved through this rather than around it? Then take one step toward it today. And if you're watching this right now, subscribe to Inner Steel. Every video on this channel is built for this exact work. Point 5. A more fatty, the most radical idea in human history. On April 5, 1955, Albert Einstein died at Princeton Hospital. The nurses reported that in his final hours, he was not afraid. He had spent the last weeks of his life writing equations, corresponding with colleagues, continuing his work. When asked about death, he had said years earlier, "I feel such a sense of solidarity with everything living that it does not matter to me where the individual begins and ends." He had made peace. Not resignation. Not defeat. Total acceptance. Friedrich Nietzsche called this a more fatty love of fate. Not tolerance of fate. Not endurance of fate. Love. The Stoics arrived at the same place from a different direction. They called it acceptance of the natural order, the idea that everything that happens, pain, loss, failure, death, humiliation, is part of a rational universe unfolding exactly as it must. And here is the radical implication: not only should you not resist what happens, you should want it to have happened. Not because it doesn't hurt. Because it is yours. This is not passive. This is the most active possible relationship with reality. Because the man who fights reality is always losing. He is wrestling with what is already done, arguing with facts, spending his life in a permanent state of war with things he cannot change. The man who accepts reality, who says, "This is mine, this happened, I will use it," is free to act. He is not dragging the past with him. He is using it as fuel. James Stockdale spent 7 years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam. He was tortured repeatedly. He was kept in solitary confinement. He watched men break. He later described what saved him, the philosophy of Epictetus, which he had studied at Stanford before being shot down. The idea that there are things within our control and things outside it. That suffering itself is not the problem, our resistance to it is. Stockdale chose to want his circumstances. To own them. To refuse to be a victim of them. He returned from Vietnam more whole than when he left. The practice: think of something that has happened to you, a loss, a failure, something that felt like the worst thing, and ask, what would it mean to love that this happened? Not to pretend it was good, but to take ownership of it as the specific event that shaped you into who you are right now. What did it build in you? Point 6. The Stoic silence. Why the strong man speaks less. In ancient Sparta, soldiers were trained in something unusual alongside combat: silence. They were taught that a man who speaks before he thinks has already been defeated. That the mouth, undisciplined, exposes the mind, reveals weaknesses, and surrenders power the moment it opens. The word laconic, meaning brief and forceful speech, comes from Laconia, the region of Sparta. When Philip II of Macedon sent a threatening message, "If I enter Laconia, I will raise your city to the ground," the Spartans sent back a single word: "If." That one word sent Philip's army marching in a different direction. The Stoics were equally precise about the power of controlled speech. Epictetus wrote, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Silence is not emptiness. It is containment. It is power held in reserve. In the modern world, men are trained to perform constantly. To update. To share. To post. To announce. Every thought, every ambition, every grievance put on display. The algorithm rewards noise. The culture applauds reaction. And this performance destroys men. Because the man who announces his goals has already satisfied the desire to achieve them. The brain cannot distinguish between doing a thing and telling people you are going to do it. Both release dopamine. So the talker gets the reward without the work. Because the man who vents every frustration teaches others exactly where his limits are. He is handing a map of his weaknesses to anyone paying attention. Because the man who reacts immediately is controlled by whoever provoked him. The provocateur wins. The strongest men in any room are rarely the loudest. They listen more than they speak. They observe more than they announce. They act more than they promise. This is not coldness. The Stoic is present, deeply present, but he has mastered the art of response over reaction. He speaks when it matters. He acts when others are still talking. The practice: for 1 full day, stop yourself before every non-essential response. Ask, does this need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said right now? If the answer to any of these is no, stay quiet. Notice what you learn. Point 7. Death is the ultimate teacher, memento mori. In ancient Rome, when a general returned from a great military victory, there was a tradition. A slave would ride behind him in the chariot, not to serve him, but to whisper in his ear 3 words, repeated over and over. Memento mori. Remember you will die. Not as a curse. As a gift. Because the Romans understood something that the modern world has pathologically tried to forget. The awareness of death is not morbid. It is clarifying. It is the most powerful productivity tool ever devised. Steve Jobs, not a Stoic in any formal sense, said something at Stanford that has echoed through a generation. Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. He built one of the most consequential companies in human history. He was diagnosed with cancer. He refused surgery for 9 months, experimenting with alternative diets, a decision he later called the stupidest of his life. He had 11 more years after that diagnosis. In those 11 years, he produced the iPhone, the iPad, and transformed multiple industries. Not despite the awareness of death. Because of it. Memento mori strips away everything that doesn't matter. It asks, if you had 6 months left, would you spend tomorrow doing what you're planning to do? It exposes the time you spend performing for people who don't care. The years wasted in the wrong career because it looked good at dinner parties. The relationships maintained from habit rather than love. The dreams deferred because you told yourself you'd get to them someday. Someday doesn't exist on a calendar. The Stoics did not think about death to become sad. They thought about it to become alive, in the deepest, most intentional sense of that word. Because the man who knows he is mortal does not waste Tuesdays. The practice, this week, find 5 minutes alone. Sit with the fact that you will die. Not abstractly, specifically. That there will be a last morning. A last conversation. A last decision you make. Let it land. Then ask, given that, what deserves your energy today? If you want to keep going deeper into this philosophy, subscribe to Inner Steel. There is much more where this came from. Point 8. Eudaimonia. You are not chasing happiness, you are building a soul. In 1946, Viktor Frankl published Man's Search for Meaning. He had survived 4 concentration camps, including Auschwitz. He had watched his wife, his parents, and his brother die. He had lost everything that can be taken. And he discovered something inside the camps that no guard could reach, meaning. He wrote, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost anyhow." The Stoics had a word, eudaimonia, that is often translated as happiness, but that is a catastrophic mistranslation. Eudaimonia means something closer to the fullness of a soul that is functioning according to its highest nature. The Stoics were not interested in feeling good. They were interested in being good. Functioning excellently. Living in alignment with reason, virtue, and purpose. Here is the difference, and why it matters. The man who chases happiness is always dependent on external conditions. He needs the weather to be right. The people around him to behave correctly. The business to go well. The compliments to keep coming. The man who pursues eudaimonia is building something internal, a quality of character that makes him more himself regardless of what is happening around him. He is not asking, "Am I happy right now?" He is asking, "Am I becoming the man I am supposed to be?" These are very different questions. The first makes you a victim of circumstances. The second makes you an architect. Frankl, in the absolute worst circumstances a human being can endure, found meaning in the act of helping other prisoners. In imagining the lectures he would give when he was free. In the love he still carried for his wife, even not knowing if she lived. He could not change his circumstances. He could change what he made of them. The Stoics called this virtue, not in the moralistic sense, but in the original Latin sense of virtus, excellence, strength, the full expression of one's capacity. The practice. Write down what kind of man you are trying to become. Not what you want to have. Not how you want to feel. What kind of man? What qualities define him? Then ask, what did you do today that moved you toward that man, or away from him? Point 9. Indifference to outcomes. The paradox of the highly effective man. In 1970, a young sailor named Bernard Moitessier was in the running to win the Golden Globe race, the first solo, non-stop, round-the-world sailing race. He was winning. He had only to sail back to England. He kept going. He rounded Cape Horn, crossed the Pacific, and sailed past New Zealand, 38,000 miles in total. He never returned to England. He sent a message to race organizers via slingshot off a passing ship. "I am continuing non-stop towards the Pacific Islands because I am happy at sea, and perhaps also to save my soul." He sacrificed the prize to remain true to what the journey meant to him. He finished alone, in Tahiti, 7 months later. This is one of the most stoic acts in modern history, and the man had probably never read Epictetus. The principle is this. The Stoics drew a hard line between the process and the outcome. They gave everything to the process, the preparation, the action, the character expressed in the effort. And they held the outcome loosely. Not with indifference to quality, with indifference to reward. Because the outcome is not always in your control. You can prepare perfectly for an interview and not get the job. You can train perfectly and not win the race. You can write the best proposal and still lose the contract. You can love someone fully and still lose them. If your worth, your peace, your identity, is attached to the outcome, you are permanently fragile. But the man who does excellent work because excellence is his standard, not because he needs the trophy, is unbreakable. He wins, and it confirms what he already knew. He loses, and he asks what he can learn. Neither the victory nor the defeat defines him. His standards define him. The Stoics called these preferred indifference, things that were nice to have, but that your deepest self did not depend on. Health is preferable to illness. Success is preferable to failure. But the Stoic philosopher's soul was equally intact in either condition. This is not apathy. This is the highest possible engagement with life. The practice: identify a result you are anxious about right now, a goal, an outcome, something you want badly. Separate your effort from your identity. Commit fully to the process. And practice releasing your grip on the result. Act excellently. Accept what comes. Point 10. Negative visualization, the ancient art of wanting what you already have. In 430 BC, Athens was one of the greatest cities in the world. Art, philosophy, democracy, architecture, the peak of human civilization at that moment. Then the plague came. In 2 years, between a quarter and a third of the Athenian population was dead. Including Pericles, the great leader. Including thousands of families, craftsmen, thinkers. The historian Thucydides survived and recorded what he saw. He also recorded something strange. The people who had most deeply appreciated Athens before the plague, who had walked through the agora with a kind of grateful wonder, handled the catastrophe differently. They did not collapse into nihilism. They had already understood, somewhere inside them, that nothing was permanent. They had lived as if the beauty could be taken. And so when it was, they were not destroyed. The Stoics made this into a formal practice, negative visualization. Or as they called it, premeditatio malorum. The premeditation of evils. This is not pessimism. It is the most powerful form of gratitude ever devised. The practice: before your day begins, briefly contemplate the loss of what you have. Imagine your health gone. Your family absent. Your work taken from you. Your home empty. Your eyesight, your mind, your voice, gone. Not to be dramatic. Not to catastrophize. But to let the imagined absence restore the awareness of the actual presence. Because the man who never imagines losing his wife takes her for granted. The man who briefly imagines loss sees her across the breakfast table and something in him softens, opens, recognizes, she is here. That is a miracle. The man who never imagines losing his health eats badly, sleeps badly, burns his body as if there will always be more. The man who briefly imagines losing it treats each morning of health as a gift. You do not have to wait for the catastrophe to be grateful. The Stoics were not the first to discover this. Every wisdom tradition has pointed at the same truth: we do not know what we have until it is gone. The Stoic practice is the refusal to wait for gone. The practice: tonight, before you sleep, take 2 minutes to visualize losing 3 things you currently take for granted. Your health. Someone you love. Something you have built. Let yourself feel the imagined absence. Then put it down. And let the gratitude fill the space it left behind. Point 11. The inner citadel, building a self that cannot be sacked. In 410 AD, the Visigoths sacked Rome. For the first time in 800 years, the city fell. Citizens who had never known anything but Roman invincibility were in shock. The eternal city, Rome, had fallen. Augustine of Hippo wrote The City of God in response. His central argument: you have been building your security in the wrong city. Marcus Aurelius understood this centuries earlier. He called it the inner citadel. Not a physical place. Not a reputation. Not a position. Not money. Not a relationship. Not a career. A place inside the mind, the part of you that is untouchable. The part that no army can enter, that no insult can breach, that no failure can flatten, that no success can inflate beyond recognition. Because everything external will eventually be taken. The empire. The career. The body. The name. Everything returns to dust. But the character built through decades of discipline, reflection, and deliberate choice, that leaves something. Not in monuments. In the people you shaped. In the moments where your steadiness held space for someone else's chaos. In the decisions made well, in private, when no one was watching. The inner citadel is not built in one session. It is built the way all great architecture is built, slowly, day by day, stone by stone, through the accumulation of small, right choices. Marcus Aurelius was an emperor. The things that happened to him would crush most men. Plague, war, betrayal by men he trusted, the death of children, the weight of an empire. He bent. He struggled. He doubted. He wrote it all down. And he never broke. Not because he was born differently. Because he had spent a lifetime building the inner citadel. That is the work. That is what this channel is about. That is what becoming so strong that nothing affects you actually means. Not that you feel nothing. You will feel everything, deeply, fully, completely. But the feeling passes through you. It does not own you. It does not define your next action. It does not topple the citadel. You remain. The practice. Every evening, ask yourself 3 questions. First, did I react today, or did I respond? Second, did I act according to my values or against them? Third, what can I do tomorrow more in alignment with the man I am building? That's the work. Every day. Without audience, without applause. Just you and the citadel. Closing. We started with Marcus Aurelius in a burning world, writing to himself. Not because the world was not on fire. It was. But because he understood something that took a lifetime to earn, that the only fire worth controlling is the one inside you. If you control that, you control everything that matters. The man who has mastered his inner world does not need perfect circumstances. He does not need easy seasons. He does not need the approval of others, the validation of his peers, or the luck of an uncomplicated life. He needs himself. Sharpened. Steady. Present. Become so strong that nothing affects you is not a destination. It is a direction. You walk toward it every day, and every day you get further from the man who could be toppled by small things. Practice the philosophy. Embrace voluntary hardship. Zoom out and see your life from above. Face your obstacles as teachers. Love your fate. Speak less and act more. Remember your mortality. Pursue your highest self. Release your grip on outcomes. Cultivate gratitude through imagined loss. Build the inner citadel. Not all at once. One brick at a time. That is enough. That is everything. If this video gave you something, a single idea that landed, a single shift in how you see yourself, then subscribe to Inner Steel right now. Hit that button. This channel exists for men who are done being fragile. Men who are done being controlled by what they cannot govern. Men who are building, quietly and seriously, a mind that nothing can defeat. Hit subscribe. Come back tomorrow. The work continues. Remember what Marcus Aurelius wrote in the dark, not for anyone else, but for himself. Confine yourself to the present. That present is now. Use it.